As Trinidad and Tobago prepares for General Elections 2025, a critical conversation is the youth and the power of the youth vote. And joining us this morning to jump into the discussion are Chris Hossain, former youth parliamentarian, and Julia Lee King, first-year law student from the University of the West Indies. Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Julia. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us this morning. We appreciate it and looking forward to this conversation, because one of the things that we are seeing with conversations on the streets is how many youths are voting versus they're not going to vote. So we need to get into that. But before we get into that, Chris, I would like to start with you. What does the power of the youth vote mean to you?
Well, first, good morning. Of course, good morning, Trinidad and Tobago and everyone in the studio. The youth vote has historically changed the direction in leadership in this country. I think globally, young people have charted a course that, again, continues to define our history. What we're seeing right now in Trinidad and Tobago is a bit of, I don't know if the word is frustration. We live in a very social era where everything you say and do, it is recorded. Right now we are communicating live, and so my peers are looking at us and they're going to comment. Yeah. And depending on what I say here, it can go viral for good or bad reason. Right. And so the vote or the investment that young people are putting forward, it is, I think, with prudence, and it is informed. You know, we're chastised sometimes as not having enough information and making a vote, or sometimes not coming out and vote. But the question you must ask is if it is we are the target audience on the end of the message. And so for me, I think it's a very important thing. I think this reset every 5 years that we get is an extreme privilege. And as any patriot, I want to encourage all young people to go out and express that democratic right as part of the process. And of course, your vote is an investment for the next 5 years. It is an investment. Chris, you mentioned a few things there that we have to come back to. But before we do that, Julia, good morning again and welcome. What are your thoughts on the importance of the right to vote of young people?
So the right to vote is very important and it's actually powerful. The youth demographic actually makes up the largest demographic in Trinidad. So that means that we, the youth, actually have the power to influence the elections. And another thing is that we as the youth, we will be affected the most out of everyone by voting. Our future, our education, our jobs, especially as it relates to things like climate policy, we, the youth, will be affected the most.
Yeah, that's something to consider as well. Coming back to you, Chris, because you went into, of course, now we're in the digital age. Let's talk about from where you sit the role of digital media in shaping young people's opinion when it comes to voting and their behavior.
Well, there was once upon a time in this country where the medium in which you got your information from the political players, from the political hustings, would have been through the newspapers or the 7 p.m. news or even the radio. Now, as I said earlier on, we see in real time the things that you say. Even though we are in an election season right now, and though the season is quite short, and I know that you all are probably extremely busy, right? But the thing is, we are seeing everything that you say and would have said in the past 5 years. So we're looking at your parliamentary record. We're looking at the things that you say in your political parties and the hustings, even in your internal elections, and how you run your organization. What is the political offering that you're giving to us? So for me, this is my second election that I'm going to vote in. And so as I said earlier on, this is an investment that I'm making through my vote. And so in 2020, I made an investment. And so I am looking at the ROI of that. Yeah. And so I am one vote, and I will vote on the 28th. And I think second-time voters as well, we're a bit more informed because we invested, right? So we are way more informed on how you conducted yourself in the past 5 years. We will determine if we choose to support that type of politics or not. And social media played a critical part in communicating that to us.
Definitely does. If it's one thing, once it happens, it is immortalized on social media forever. Julia, from your peers on the ground in the University of the West Indies, what sort of feedback are you getting from them when it comes to voting in the election?
So there definitely seems to be sort of a voter apathy among the youth. I would have interacted with youth in my community, and I think the youth, I'm not sure what it is, but they definitely seem like maybe their vote doesn't matter, it doesn't count. And at university as well, there definitely seems to be that same sort of energy. And I think that's definitely a concern because the youth vote is very crucial.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, university particularly, it is concerning because one of the things we look to for tertiary institutions are places to birth reform, to birth change and great ideas. How important do you think the role of university bodies and student organizations are when it comes to influencing the vote?
So in terms of influencing the vote, I definitely think that there needs to be some sort of educational reform implemented. We could definitely educate the students about the right to vote, the historical importance of voting, how our predecessors would have fought for us to have the privilege to vote, and just how important it is, and the importance of exercising that right and going out to the polls and voting.
Yeah, something very important. Chris, one of the things you would have mentioned is, you are one vote. And something Julia just referenced is there are people who will say, well, my one vote doesn't matter. And we have seen some youth saying that quite openly. What would you say to them?
Well, that's your democratic right.
Yeah.
As much as I would encourage young people to come out and vote, if you are not pleased in the status quo, the political landscape, that's your right to choose, to protest if you want to put it that way. The local government election is a litmus test for what is to come for general. We had a voter turnout of 30.34%, which usually in local is a low voter turnout, but not that low.
Yeah.
And so at that time, and I remember I penned an article to the newspapers speaking about the political landscape and wanting that generational transfer in leadership. And you see some things changed in the country, right? Not to be overly political, but you would have seen some political maneuverings in many political organizations. And so I do think that the parties involved would have taken that into consideration. The problem I'm having is if it is genuine, because you are seeing, again, a lot of shifting happening, and on one side you have a new prime minister, and on the other side you have not so new prime minister, some new person surrounding her. And then if you look over in Tobago, you have a new political leader of the TPP. And so these dynamics are definitely going to be interested. I do think the landscape has improved from 2023 to now. The communication has improved. We can always want better, of course, but I do think it has improved, and I do expect the voter turnout to increase slightly because of those changes.
That's an interesting perspective, because one of the things you hear a lot of people talking on the ground is that they're perceiving there's going to be a low voter turnout. So it's good to hear it from that perspective, especially coming from you as a former youth parliamentarian. And as we mentioned that, would you say your involvement in youth parliament has really influenced your views on your civic responsibility in voting?
Definitely. So as Julia mentioned, we do need to have a bit more information in terms of the education curriculum that maybe informs you about, being a patriot. Yeah. Your vote, your right, your civic duty. In doing youth parliament at that time, and it was a few years ago, but what it taught me was the structure we operate under in this country. And so it forced me to do a little history, and it forced me to understand public policy, debate, and the way we get things done in this country. So I do think it's an extreme privilege that I had. And in my capacity, in these small circles that I may be in, I try to influence persons, not in terms of the political outcome on the ballot, but in getting more interested in politics. And so the parliament really, and I have to, as we say, big them up a bit here right now, because they have year after year put forward cohort after cohort, really. I mean, a number of young leaders come from the youth parliament network.
Definitely. Now, speaking about the youth particularly, Julia, what reforms, if any, would you suggest in order to make elections a little bit more youth-friendly and also accessible?
So, as I said earlier, the educational reform is definitely an important aspect, definitely getting the youth informed, as Chris would have said, getting them equipped with the knowledge that they need to make a decision. We definitely need to mobilize the youth, get them out, get them involved in the politics, and really show them the importance of their vote and why it's important.
Yeah, very important. All right. And it's time for us to wind down in what is definitely a busy season. Chris, let's start with you. Any closing comments for Trinidad and Tobago?
Oh, of course. I was listening on, and your guest before he spoke, I think the host as well spoke about having a peaceful election. Yeah, and I think we are a beautiful country. I want to tell Trinidad and Tobago that come April the 28th at 6 p.m. or a little bit after the count, we all have to live, grow, and be productive here. And so building Trinidad and Tobago will take all of us and not some.
And Julia?
I would like to urge the youth to really come out on the 28th and vote. Vote for your future, vote for your education, vote for your jobs, and ultimately vote for the party that you think you can trust with your future.
Well, thank you so much, Julia Lee King, first-year law student, and Chris Hossain, former youth parliamentarian, with us this morning speaking about the power of the youth vote. Stay tuned.